So I'm delighted this week to have on the podcast Caroline Goyder, get my words out, who is an author, a voice expert and course creator, a speaker, and I didn't know how to say this, but a TED talker. I'm sure that's not quite the right way to say it, but a TED talker. I am going to, as always, get Caroline to introduce herself. I always get my guests to give their own bit of background about themselves. But today is really focusing on authenticity when you do public speaking, and I'll explain why. But welcome, Caroline. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Lisa. It is lovely to be here.
So, we're going to be getting into this in a minute, because presenting publicly, public speaking is something that puts the fear of God into many of us. And I work one-to-one with busy professionals, ambitious people, business owners, and at some point we all have to stand up and do some kind of public speaking. And, I help people to look authentically themselves from the outside. So I really work with non-verbal communication. And we really do cross, because you help people to present themselves in an authentic way and connect with the audience and to speak with gravitas, but to be yourself at the same time. And that's really what I'm all about, is helping people to get to their essence. And I talk about this on the podcast all the time. We are all our best selves when we are our authentic selves, rather than playing a role or cosplaying a role, So it's kind of really important to get that and to get that across. This is something I can't wait to talk to you about today, because this is something that I personally really, really struggle with as well. And I know I'm on camera a lot, and people say I'm really surprised at that, but my God, I really am held back by lots of fears when it comes to public speaking. So I've waffled on enough already. Welcome again, Caroline. Could you just give us a bit of background about yourself and your books and everything?
Well, firstly, you framed that so beautifully, Lisa, in the sense that it is all about authenticity. And the fact that people are surprised when you say that you're nervous about public speaking is what it's all about, because most people feel that. I think it's a really, really sensible response to speaking under pressure. And I come to this precisely because of that, because I am probably not the least likely person to be a public speaking coach, but I wouldn't be top of the list if you said, who will go out there and become a public speaking coach? Amongst my friends, I'm probably in the low 50s. I am not the person who at a party is making a speech or dancing on the table or holding forth. I'm an introvert. And I'm really happy to have quiet chats with people, and I love one-to-one, but I'm not naturally someone who would orate. And so the fact that I learned this skill set to allow me to speak, I've spoken to 800 people in the last month, on a big stage in front of a huge audience, and I could walk out on that stage and feel like Caroline. And I think in a way, like maths teachers, the maths teacher at school who was the person who hadn't been great at maths but was really good at teaching it because they hadn't been great at maths. I'm that teacher, because everything that clients present to me, I feel nervous, I'm not natural at this, I'm an introvert, I'm like, yep, tick, get that, totally understand it, and I can help people find themselves, even if they're an introvert, even if they hate public speaking, even if they're shy in front of an audience, because it's doable for all of us.
That's amazing. And I live with hope from that statement, because, I recently even have turned something down. I know. London Fashion Week as well.
You're not alone. And I yes, let's make sure that next time you say yes. That would be a lovely...
It was an immediate no, and it came from a place of fear. And I know that. And now reflecting on it, I'm kicking myself. And I know that a lot of people will do the same. I just convinced myself I didn't need to do it. I so should have done it. Anyway.
Here's my invitation next time, and this is something I apply, is when the invitation comes and you go, say yes, and then seek help. Because I have a coach still who I go to when I say yes to the thing that terrifies me. And I think it's just say yes, get help.
Right.
And then it's fine. And then it's okay.
I totally should have done that. I totally should have done that. Would you mind giving us a little bit of background about your journey to, and your TED talk and everything?
I mean, my story starts in that I've always loved words, right? I'm good with them. And I left university and I thought, I love words, so I'm going to be an actor. I trained as an actor. And it turned out that I wasn't a natural. They said, you don't have any resonance, you have no presence, you're not listening on stage, all the things that they say to actors when they're not very good. And I remember thinking, there's nothing I can do about this. It's like an identity level problem. But I'm also quite stubborn. And over about 20 years, I've been unpicking all the things they said to me when they said, you've got no presence, you've got no resonance, you're not listening on stage. And I've had to unpack a system for me to overcome those challenges. And in that journey, I trained as a voice teacher. I, worked at a drama school for 10 years, teaching business people and also actors. I've written 3 books. I wrote a book called Star Qualities, which was about A-list actors, a book called Gravitas, which was about, as you say, finding our authentic presence, and then Find Your Voice, which is about, thank you, speaking with calm and confidence. My babies.
Yes.
And then I did, as we've said, this TED Talk. I was helping speakers in Brixton, which was near where I lived at the time, at TEDx. And I think I'd coached for 2 years before Steph, who organised it, said, do you fancy doing a talk? And I went, yeah. Well, it was that moment. I probably went, no, but I said yes, right? So when the fear comes, say yes.
Okay.
And then I worked like a dog to get that presentation to a place where I felt I could walk on stage and own it. And it's changed my life. It's been watched well over 10 million times now.
That's insane.
It's mad, isn't it? Completely mad.
10 million.
And rising all the time.
And do you think that's one of the most pivotal things you've done then? Do you think that's...
It's a great calling. Well, as my coach at the time said, it is a great calling card for a speaker coach, but she also said you cannot mess this up. So the jeopardy was that, and I thought 3,000 people might watch it, but the jeopardy of walking out on stage to do a talk called The Surprising Secret of Speaking with Confidence is real, right? For a speaker coach. And because I thought no one would watch it, didn't really worry me. But luckily, I put the work in that it was good. It was good enough. And so all I would say to anybody thinking about public speaking is say yes, put the work in, and then trust that the universe will provide when you walk out on stage, because it does.
I am full of regret for not saying yes. I am beating myself up. I should have.
That's teachable,
yes. and then I should have called you, and that's really
next time. Let's do that. That's what
I'm going to do, definitely. But so 10 million views of Caroline's talk. So it's called The Surprising Secrets of
Speaking with Confidence. I mean, no pressure, right?
But you know what? It's interesting because you're saying, you're going on a stage to tell people, and a worldwide stage, millions of people, to tell people how to talk with confidence. You have to be fully confident, because otherwise but it's sort of like, I'm sort of a personal stylist, so everywhere I go, I'm completely, I've got to be wearing the right thing.
That's hard. Yeah, I totally get how hard that is, because like I spoke in front of one of the big political parties at the beginning of the year, and I was speaking about grace under pressure. And it felt very, very high stakes. And so the only thing I know how to do, and this is a real thing for anybody in public speaking, is if you have that feeling of pressure, imposter syndrome, name it. So the first thing I said in walking out on stage was, you've heard from some really great speakers today, that a lot of them are MPs, ministers, all sorts. I'm not that person. I'm an introvert.
Right.
And when we step into that place of discomfort or uncertainty or imposter syndrome, and when we just embrace it as a speaker and say, do you know what, I'm an introvert, that's not me, that great person who dazzled you on stage, that's not me, this is me, people, they relate to that, because that speaks to something in all of us. Everybody has imposter syndrome to some extent. I really think that, and if they don't, they should.
Well, I think, there are the odd people that don't, and I think they're kind of the probably the politicians.
And it's not a good quality in life. Life
No.
is uncertain and difficult and challenging. It's a sensible thing to have imposter syndrome, but just bring it in as a speaker. That's all.
So I help people to work out how to look authentically themselves. And I am on this podcast going to go into at the end what I suggest you wear if you get a big gig, public speaking. And it's important. I'm going to be talking about how to still be authentically yourself in that situation. So you said you walked on a stage in front of 800 people and you were Caroline when you walked on the stage. You just were authentically yourself. Now I turn into someone else, and it is a different version of me. I would love to be able to walk onto a stage and be my quirky, crazy self and own that.
I'd love that too. Yeah, that would be amazing.
I would love to do that, but something holds me back, and it's fear, and I get these repetitive messages in my head. So say if I'm waiting in the wings to go on stage and the terror's building, and I know I'm going to be in front of those 800 people in a minute, and I've got my speech, I've rehearsed it down to the last letter, I know my subject, I know my content, I know I'm good at what I do, but I'm terrified, and the panic starts to build. How can I manage that?
Do you notice the gesture you just did up towards the upper chest? People, our bodies really know what that's about. And really, really simply, and it's simple it's like simple driving lesson stuff. You've got to practice this every day. People do a lot of breathing now. People learn how to breathe in Pilates or yoga, and I'm sure your audience are pretty aware of all of this. But the thing that we don't make the connection with is that voice is out breath and pause is in breath. And what happens to speakers, and I work with people who are very, very senior in their different organizations who this happens to. Our bodies see an audience as a threat. Our breathing tenses up, our shoulders get tight, our chest tightens, and everything is fight or flight. It's very narrow, tunnel vision. The audience feel threatening. It feels life or death. Time disappears because there's no time in fight or flight. You're just in survival. And people associate speaking with that fight or flight state. Now, actors spend a good year and a half learning how to breathe. You don't have to spend a year and a half doing this, by the way. So that when that moment comes, instead of tensing up like you're going to punch someone, and I learned to do this and it changed my life, you open up into the fear. It's like watching a great tennis player in a way. I mean, I couldn't play Wimbledon, but what I do know how to do is when the fear comes, relax your feet, lengthen your spine, breathe wide into your back, and tell your nervous system that it's safe, like we do with an animal. If your cat or dog is nervous, you calm it, you stroke it. If your child is nervous, you calm or stroke them. We need to do the same thing to our nervous system. So before walking out on stage at that big event earlier in the year, I lengthened my out breath. As soon as I lengthen my out breath, my heart slows down. A long out breath slows heart rate. A fast in breath raises heart rate. So people show up like this, and it's no wonder it's not comfortable. As soon as you make yourself feel safe in that moment, you can be Lisa. And that would be so cool if you would. I'd love to see you on stage having fun. I think that would be awesome. That would be so fun to watch.
I would love to get there. I would. Do you know what? And weirdly, the strange thing is I can do it on camera.
Yeah.
And my husband, who is a television producer, says to me, and I'm not showing off here, listeners, I'm not a show off type of person, but he's produced actors and presenters for years. He says I'm a complete natural when I get in front of the camera, and I don't get nervous. It's weird, but if I walk on a stage, it's in real life
Eyes
thing.
So we would play in a coaching session. What we would play with is the idea of contribution, because when you're talking to camera that you're just talking to one person, and that's why you're so good. When we walk out and look at 800 people, it feels very threatening, unless you remember that they're all just there to get something useful. And one of the things that really helps is to interview 3, 4, 5 people who are going to be at the event beforehand. And if you go off and you say to them, hey, tell me a bit about what you want to get from the event, anything you're worried about, I should know about, then when you show up to speak, you show up in service because you've talked to those 5 people. And you might even say thank you to those who spoke to me before the event. And you can mention some of the things they asked for, or you can tell a story that covers the things they asked for that comes from your past. And what that does for me as a speaker is it's not like, ta-da, it's the Impress Your Audience show, which I would run away if I thought it was that. It's these people need something and I'm going to help, which I bet is where you are on camera.
Yeah. And it's thinking of it, you're helping the audience.
That's it. If you show up to help and you're prepared, everybody's happy. Nobody cares about perfect. They just don't.
Well, people don't care about perfect, actually. And on this podcast, I was just saying to someone else who's coming on soon, if I make a mistake and say, oh, I've forgotten what I'm talking about, I leave it in. I don't edit it out.
Yeah.
Because people actually really value the authenticity, that this is what we can resonate. They even do this now on live telly. They do it on B&B, all of that. There's, oh, whoops, I made a mistake. No one is perfect, so it's important to know that. And this is when the audience opens up and you can communicate better because you're communicating on a human level.
And it's exactly the same on stage. As long as you've got a plan, as long as you know what your signposts are, then being playful, owning the mistakes, owning the imposter syndrome, it engages an audience, not the opposite.
I mean, there is that thought there as well that if you are really, the audience can feel, they can pick up your energy, can't they? So if you are really nervous and awkward, I think that then makes the audience awkward. Are there any tips for like trying to turn it around mid-speech? Or
that's such a good question. And
yeah, that's a difficult one.
There's 2 ways to look at this. There's the hard line and there's the kind of soft line, right? So the hard line one is, I interviewed David Hare years ago, and he said nerves are vanity because they're about you, they're not about the audience. And I think that's okay if you're someone who's, he's done a lot of performance.
Yeah.
Nerves are vanity. I think a softer way to look at it is that all audiences understand that you're speaking is a high stakes activity. And I think what you've just said about owning what happens on stage is the way in. I mean, in front of this big crowd, my title was Grace Under Pressure.
Yeah.
And I was really nervous. So I said, I don't know if this is my title or my internal monologue. And it was just kind of naming, it's just, actors will say, whatever's there, bring it in. So if you're ill that day, be that character ill on stage. And the speaking version of that is if you've got your heart racing, bring it in. It shows you care. The thing that is confusing for audiences is when they see someone is nervous, but they're pretending it's fine. Because then there's a mistrust. It's like if something happens on camera in a studio, you can't pretend it's not happening because the audience go, what? Well, there's a disconnect. So you've got to bring it all in and be okay with what happens. It's almost like a kind of mindfulness thing. Whatever is there, be okay, be with it. And an audience will love you for that ease under pressure. You can't lie, you can't pretend, you can't fake it. You just have to be there.
I love it. Just own the mistake and bring it in to the talk. It will enrich.
Exactly. It's about the meta, very funny word, but it's the meta state. It's the ease. It's like a stand-up comedian dealing with a heckle. It's the ease with which you handle it that we're looking for as audience.
I mean, I do find it quite awkward if I go to a comedy club, when they don't get laughs. But that's sort of, I guess,
oh God, that's a whole different level of skill that I have no comment. I mean, I bow down to stand-up comedians. It's just a different league.
It is, isn't it? To go, yeah. But telling jokes to make people laugh, you're really risking so much more. It is a completely different thing. You've got to be hard. You've got to be like Teflon to
I love the episode where you talk to stand-up comedians about what they wear, because that must be fascinating. Anyway, that's a whole different.
I would, yes, I'd love to get a comedian on here. That would be amazing. So, What about, I was going to ask you if there's any particular speaker that you really admire, because I'd quite like to, start. I'm going to put myself out there. You see, Caroline, this has had such an impact, that invitation that I turned down. I'm now, I'm determined to turn this around. Yes.
Yay.
And do some kind of speech soon. This year it's going to happen.
I'm there to help. Let's
Yes.
do this.
I'm going to say yes to something. I don't know what. But we've got some great speakers. I think Mel Robbins she's quite good.
She's good.
Mel Robbins is quite a good speaker. But are there anyone that you would say is really inspiring? Is there any?
So I think if we're talking TED Talks, because it's a kind of good common reference point. It's like anything these days, because our audiences are so diffuse. Common reference points are really rare, but I think TED Talks are good common reference. And I think Brené Brown, for me as a speaker, has a kind of ease and that word authenticity. She's just herself.
Well, interestingly, that's her whole thing.
Vulnerability. And I think that makes her a really great speaker.
Right, because she's someone to watch, to watch basically, who talks about being vulnerable and owning vulnerability, because that is what makes us human.
She models it. And then there's the kind of Michelle Obamas who have that kind of queen poise and power.
She's got power.
Yeah.
She's got a lot of presence.
One of the actors I talked to for that first book was Anna Massey, and she talked, RIP, but she talked a lot about the importance of being physically in good fitness on stage. And the Greeks would have talked about this, the idea that if we're physically well aligned, if we have energy, if we stand well within our own limitations, because everybody's working with different bodies, that physical confidence really exudes power on stage. So just things like going for a run in the morning or doing yoga help you show up better on stage, like they help actors and dancers show up better on stage. In a way, it's the same. And Michelle Obama just physically is aligned well. She moves well. Her voice is great. And then add to that the power of her message, and it's dynamite.
She is amazing, actually. And also she's like talking, because it always goes back to fashion for me, but she is one of those women who just unapologetically super fashionable and owns it. And it used to be, we had sort of Hillary Clinton in her pantsuits, didn't we, in the 80s? And it's just, Michelle Obama brought a lot of progress and a lot of glamour.
Yeah,
I'm grateful for that.
The Merkel trouser suit is
yeah, exactly. That's not really my thing. But one thing I do, and I think a lot of people do when they're talking on stage, I suddenly talk really fast and I'm like, oh, okay, and I've got my speech and I'm like, let's get to the end of this because I want this to be over. And panic talk. And even when I got married, people said they've never seen anyone go up the aisle faster.
Yes,
like, sort of practically running behind me. I was just like running up the aisle.
Get this done.
I was so nervous. Everyone looking at me. I was like, oh. So what could it's breath again? Is it breath to sort of catch your breath? And
I'm thinking about what I've learned to do as a speaker. It's like owning the discomfort, because being looked at by lots of people is uncomfortable. If you think about our ancestors, it meant they probably wanted to hurt you. Being stared at by lots of people is not a good sign. So what we've got to do is teach the nervous system that it's okay. So actors do something where you just sit in front of an audience for 3 minutes and do nothing.
Oh, really?
And that's just really about being okay with being looked at. So what I would say to someone who really worries about that moment of rushing and being looked at is practice your speech in front of an audience. Because someone who you care about their opinion, but who isn't too daunting. And before you start to speak, walk out in front of them, relax your feet, breathe out, wait for the breath in, hang out there, and then start. Because those Brené Browns, those Michelle Obamas, what they're doing often is taking a moment. And if you take a moment to take in the room, to smile at people, to feel the mood of the space. You can do it online as well. You say to your system it's okay, because when we're running away from someone, we're not doing that. When we're with our friends, we are. So just taking that moment to be there and connect says to your system, you've got this. And then on every pause, you repeat, you rinse and repeat. Every pause is a moment to collect your thoughts, to connect to the audience, to breathe. I couldn't speak in front of an audience as an introvert without knowing that every pause is a moment to come back to myself.
That's really interesting.
It changes everything. It really does.
It's
It's
very
just
hard.
practice.
It's very hard to look out, particularly if you are in a speech situation. I don't like being looked at, and I think a lot of people dress down. Again, I'm back to fashion, but dress down because they don't want to be looked at. So they think that if you're interested in fashion and all of that, that you're somehow some sort of show off, when it isn't about that, really.
No, it's about owning your power, isn't it? It's about knowing who you are,
Yeah,
communicating in a way that makes others feel good.
it's communicating. I mean, this is what it all, so I help people non-verbal communication to communicate who they are through what they wear. And you're helping people to actually, the actual communication. There are only these ways we have. There's not just one way to communicate. There's, as humans, obviously, there
It's
are lots of
choices.
ways to communicate and how we enter a room and all those sorts of things. It's not about being the loudest. It's not about being the most flamboyant person. It's not about being the trendiest, most out there dressed person at all. It's coming back always to being yourself, isn't it? And being comfortable and
And
authentic.
bringing I mean, I really just believe that speaking in public is being in service. David Attenborough is someone else you could name as a really great speaker. And it's not the David Attenborough show, even though it's the David Attenborough show. He's speaking in service to something much, much, much bigger than him. And we love those people. And it stops being about how do I seem? How am I showing up? What do they think? And it's just, how can I help? How can I help? And that's public speaking is lovely when you show up from how can I help?
I mean, I have done it, before, and really felt buzzing afterwards. I've done it quite a lot of times in my life, but I think because I haven't done it for such a long time now, because of COVID and everything else, the sort of fear starts to creep back in. But
This
how
is
can I help is good.
and this thing about COVID has affected so many people, and people who seem really confident on the surface. I'm hearing this on an almost daily basis. So if COVID has affected anybody listening around your confidence, it's really normal. Me
Yeah.
too, right? All of us.
Yeah, it's had a really deep effect on all of us, and I won't go into, with kids and teenagers, there's all
Oh,
sorts of
don't. Yeah, it's
things
awful.
going
It
on.
really, but we will rebuild.
We will rebuild. And so I will thank you, Carol. That's amazing. I'm gonna just go through some tips of what to wear, because that can be your armor.
And can
So
we talk about TED? I mean, are we allowed to name this?
yes, yes, yes. So the TED Talk. So I helped Caroline with her outfit for the TED Talk.
And since, right? I mean, it was absolutely fundamental. And I still take your advice as a speaker. So anything that I say has a lot of Lisa threaded through it.
With the outfits, because that was, you were working so hard on the actual speech and the content, but then obviously you want to walk onto the stage in something that's going to make you feel $1 million.
Yeah.
And it was the Stella McCartney, was it the sort of
The Stella
uncensored?
McCartney dress with
Yeah,
zips and then the boots, the
yeah. And a pop
Stuart
cover.
Weitzman boots.
And I think the thing is with it is that stands the test of time, because how old is that TED Talk now?
10 years. I mean, and it wasn't, I remember talking about it, that because we knew that even if only 300 people, and my mum watched it on repeat 300 times, that it was going to be there for a while, because that with TED. So that was a conversation I remember us having at the time, and you helped me choose something that hasn't really dated.
Yeah, because I think, if you're doing something like a TED talk, I think, and you want it to, it's going to be there for years to come. So this is a decade ago that Caroline did hers. If you wear something particularly on trend, pattern wise, or at the time, it will potentially look dated in the future. So it's just something to consider. If you're someone who's a real fashionista and you wear the latest trends and that's your vibe, go for it. But I actually personally, I'd choose something more classic if it's something that's going to go to last that long. And I'd avoid pattern as well, unless you're a real pattern person, because that's distracting and also that dates. But my tip would be to go for a nice block colour that really suits you, that makes you feel confident, but be comfortable in the outfit. Don't wear anything restrictive and, that's going to make you a bit stiff in the way you move. So it needs to move with your body. And
Amen.
just your style, it has to be, because I'm not someone who would wear a really tailored look, because it's not my vibe. So if I was doing a talk, I wouldn't then choose a tailored look. I need to still choose something that fits with my authentic style. So it's worth spending time thinking about what that is. So you're creative, obviously. So your style, Caroline, is creative.
Fleetwood Mac is the thing I always
It's
we always
Stevie
talk.
Nicks.
I've got a bit of a 70s vibe, I think. And the thing that I still use to speak with is those Stuart Weitzman boots, and it's something that I say a lot to clients as well. I'm really, I've always wanted to speak in flat shoes, but I think that TED talk, going on stage in those, they're elegant, but they're also super grounding boots. It
Yeah,
doesn't work if it's July and 45 degrees out there. But that is something I've passed on to other speakers. And when I speak to women who are going on stage and say, maybe don't wear the high heels this time,
yeah,
maybe find something that you could dance in all night, then, or they often come back and go, that was transformational. Because we love heels because they make us feel so kind of glam, but often because they tilt your pelvis, they change your breathing, they take you into fight or flight.
yeah.
Flight.
Well, it's another thing to worry about. It's
Mm.
another thing. So with your boots that you wore for the TED Talk. So anyone listening, go and check out Caroline's TED Talks. You'll see the outfit that we're talking about with the boots and the beautiful blue dress. You are then grounded, so you don't have to worry about wobbling around on heels. I have got friends though. One of my best friends, Charlotte, she can wear killer heels like this, and
They can dance in them all night. They're fine,
dance all night. She doesn't worry about that. She's always been a heels girl. Not me, I'm flats. So, just make sure you're comfortable. Avoid something that's going to date. Go for something a bit more classic and simple. Block colour. They would be my tips. And also, look out for something that's going to show sweat.
Oh
Because,
God, yes, that's really good advice. No
yeah,
silk shirts.
yeah, silk shirts. You're going to get a big sweat patch. Anything like that. So, and when you're in that zone, and also the lights that you have on stage are going to be hot. So, that's something to think about as well. That's going to maybe make you sweat a bit more.
And I suppose it's worth saying that for that event, and since, I mean, makeup, this, makeup really, really matters. And for that event, I had someone come and do my makeup beforehand. Since then, I've got a really great makeup artist to teach me how to do my own makeup. But I think, and in life, I'm not massively made up. But when I speak, especially because people are often taking photos, it's often videos these days, I know to really take time to do a proper full face in the nicest possible way, even if it's quite low key. And if I can, like this big event in January, I had my hair done before properly
Yeah.
by a hairdresser, because all of those things mean that when you show up, you just feel ready. And not everybody wants to spend that money. I don't always spend that money, but sometimes it says to yourself, you've got this, you're a pro, you're going to nail it. And you've just got to know the kind of the value that the event will give you, and then choose the investment you put into it.
And I mean, it made all these things together. I'm delighted. It's one of my proudest moments, the TED Talks, helping with that outfit for that. I love that.
It was transformational.
And yes. And then you walked on that stage and felt ready. It
One
is.
of the organisers said you're the most ready person in this whole room, and I
Oh,
really
amazing.
was, and that was a lot to do with what you'd done.
Oh, yeah. It has such a huge impact. It is
It's
totally
massive.
our armor, 100%. But grooming's a good point. If I ever get my photos done
Let's sort that hair.
for my website, I've just cut mine up today because I don't know what's going on. I do get a blow dry. If I've got professional photos being done for my website, I definitely always get my makeup done and I get a professional blow dry because those photos are just going to look loads better.
It makes such a difference, and it's just, we don't all have, none of us really have the money to do that on a daily basis, but there are certain things like websites, like speaking to a big audience, where it's worth making the investment. Or some people can do it themselves beautifully, can't they? So you've just got
Yeah.
to know. I'm not that person.
I'm not that person. I'm cat-handed. I can't do it. But it is an investment, 100%. Thank you so much for joining me today. That was a really good chat, so helpful. And I'm going to be I'm going to be booking some speeches, Caroline, and I'm going to be calling you up to
It's
help
flown
me.
by. I'm looking at the clock and going, oh my God, we've been talking for ages. It's absolutely,
It's
you're
flown
delightful to
past.
talk to.
And I should have said, we're going to end on the fact I should have said yes. And so to anyone listening, say yes, then get
Get
the
help.
afterwards. Do things that scare you. That's the message. Thanks, Caroline.
My total pleasure. Speak soon, Lisa.
Speak soon.